Hello, my name is James King and I'm a digital product designer from London. I'm going to talk about a short story by the author Ted Chiang. The story is called Anxiety is the Dizziness of Freedom, and it's from this collection of short stories called Exhalation. I think this story has some relevance to ergodicity economics and good decision making. My talk is called Economics with Parallel Universes. The many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics theorizes that our universe is one of many parallel universes that are constantly branching off from one another. These parallel branches originate at the quantum scale where all possible outcomes of a quantum event occur, but each in its own non-communicating branch of the universe. If you could observe and compare any two branches from the moment that they split, the difference between them would be very hard to notice at first. But over time, differences between the two branches would start to become noticeable at the macro scale. These two branches have diverged enough that the same coin tossed simultaneously in both branches has become uncorrelated. Whatever you think about the many worlds interpretation, it is a very popular idea in science fiction. And often this idea is explored by imagining a technology that can open up portals between different branches of the multiverse that allow people and things to pass through them. This portaling technology would be very useful to you if Ole Peters has offered you the chance to play his coin toss gamble. After you toss the coin, you could open a portal between the branch in which you win and the branch in which you lose and pool your wealth. If you did this after every coin flip, then your wealth would grow at a rate equal to the expected value of the gamble. Let's name this world where parallel universes do exist and people have the ability to open portals between branches, a portal multiverse. In a portal multiverse, there would be no St. Petersburg paradox, no ergodicity breaking. The people who live in this multiverse would base their decision-making on maximizing their expected value. We live in a world where we cannot detect or interact with parallel universes, whether they happen to exist or not. We experience a single series of events unfolding over time. Let's call this world the lone universe. For people inhabiting this lone universe, that is, you and me, ergodicity economics suggests that we should not think about our decisions in isolation from past and future. Instead, we need to think about decision-making policies that apply to a series of decisions over time. The world described in Ted Chiang's story is neither a portal multiverse nor a lone universe, but a world that is partway between the two. In the story, there is a device called a prism that has become widely used by people in their everyday lives. A prism can fit into a briefcase. When you open the case, a prism looks like a bulky portable computer. There's a screen and a keyboard, camera and a microphone, just like a laptop. Each prism has two LEDs, one red and one blue. And when you first activate the prism, only one of these LEDs will light up, either the red or the blue with equal probability. Well, actually, both the red and the blue LEDs light up, but each in their own separate branches of reality. Whichever light happens to turn on for you, it's the other light that turns on for your parallel self in the other branch. The prism also allows communication between these two branches. Every prism has a pad, which is a type of computer memory made from quantum bits and is shared by the prisms in both branches. Each prism can write messages to this pad, which can then be read by the prism in the other branch. There is enough space on the pad for a lifetime's worth of text communication, or a few hours of video. But once the pad fills up, no more information can be exchanged between the two branches, and the prism stops working. In the world of Chiang's story, it is possible to see and interact with parallel universes, but these interactions are limited to sending and receiving information. Let's call this type of world a prism multiverse. So what does good decision-making look like in a prism multiverse? Well, this is exactly what Ted Chiang explores in the story. We often have to make decisions where we don't have enough information to know what the right choice is. Lyle has a good job that he enjoys, but one day he receives an enticing job offer from another company. He can't decide whether he should resign and accept the offer or keep his current job. Rather than flip a coin to help him decide, he buys a new prism. Before he activates the prism, he decides that if the red LED lights up, he'll stay where he is, but if it's the blue, then he'll take the new job. Once the prism is activated, the Lyle in the red branch and the Lyle in the blue branch will follow through on their decisions and will be able to compare notes about how their choices work out. We'll return to Lyle shortly. Data brokers are companies that maintain a collection of prisms connecting to many different branches. If you don't own a prism yourself, you can visit a data broker and rent time on one of theirs. Data brokers will also use their collection of prisms to source information from other branches and sell this information in their own. There's a market for books written by famous authors and pirated from parallel branches, and some people will pay to access the social media feeds from parallel versions of their favourite celebrities. But what about more socially beneficial uses? Zoe works at a government agency tasked with preventing and mitigating natural and man-made disasters. Zoe is a data broker liaison. Her job is to field calls from a network of data brokers who, for a price, offer to pass on information to her agency about disasters that have recently occurred in other branches. You might assume that these tips would be invaluable for Zoe in preventing the same disasters from occurring in her branch, but in practice this type of information is only occasionally useful. Weather patterns in any two branches will be uncorrelated within a few weeks of activating a prism, so learning about a hurricane or a flood in one branch has no predictive benefit to another. Conversely, earthquakes are very highly correlated and happen in all branches simultaneously, offering no time to send out a warning. Occasionally, however, Zoe does receive useful tips. One example is from a broker who has information about an airplane accident that happened very recently in a parallel branch. The cause was quickly determined to be a mechanical failure in the plane. Zoe contacts the same airline in her branch, gives them the tail number, and orders them to ground the plane pending a full safety inspection. The airline complies and discovers a faulty component in the avionics system, preventing the same crash from occurring in Zoe's branch. The value of any information sourced from across branches is highly variable, but data brokers acknowledge that there is a general pattern. Here are the tips that Zoe receives from her data broker network in any given year. If we plot these tips along an x-axis that measures how correlated these events are between Zoe's branch and the source branch of each tip, and on the y-axis we plot the value of each tip, then this pattern approximates a bell curve. Tips about highly correlated events like earthquakes are not very valuable because the same information exists in both branches, and tips about highly divergent events, such as the weather, are not correlated enough to be useful. Somewhere in the middle, however, it is possible to source valuable information from other branches. A month has passed since Lyle first activated his prism. The Lyle in the blue branch has served his notice period and starts his new job tomorrow. The Lyle in the red branch, who stayed with his current employer, has some good news of his own though. He unexpectedly got a promotion. A few more months pass, and the Lyle in the blue branch is starting to regret their decision to take the new job. The novelty of working at the new company is worn off, and Red Lyle is earning a lot more than him, and, to make things worse, Red Lyle has just met someone great and they've started dating. Red Lyle and Blue Lyle's lives have started to diverge significantly, as Red Lyle has experienced several strokes of good luck. For Blue Lyle, learning about how great his life might have been from Red Lyle causes feelings of envy and resentment. In fact, the value of information from Red Lyle is approaching a net negative for Blue Lyle, damaging his mental health. So what does this tell us about good decision-making in this Prism multiverse? This is a question that the characters in Chiang's story wrestle with. They know that, for every decision they make, there is a version of themselves on some other branch that takes a different path. This leads some people to the conclusion that their decisions don't matter. If it's all going to average out anyway across the multiverse, then why even try to make the right choice? But this isn't the conclusion that Chiang leads this story towards. Sometimes our choices lead to a good outcome, and sometimes our choices lead to a bad outcome. But, as Annie Duke points out in her book, Thinking in Bets, a decision that happens to lead to a good outcome isn't necessarily a good decision. Likewise, a decision that leads to a bad outcome isn't necessarily a bad decision. It's just that luck and circumstances outside of your control also have a say in the outcome, whatever the option you happen to choose. But this is where information sourced from other branches using a prism can help us differentiate between good and bad decisions. One day you are faced with a choice just like Lyle's job offer. You have two distinct options, A and B. Your gut says that it's 50-50 as to which would be best, but you have to pick one, so you pick B. Your choice plays out, but a few weeks later you're not happy with the result, and you feel regret for the decision that you made. You visit a data broker and commission them to find 9 of your parallel selves, whose lives are correlated enough but not too much to yours. You ask the data broker to survey your parallel selves and ask them which option they took, A or B, and whether they were happy or regretful about their decision. A few days later, the data broker comes back with the results. Your gut was right. It was a 50-50 decision. 4 of your parallel selves chose option B, just like you, for a total of 5. The other 5 chose option A. However, of the 5 that chose the option B, you were the only one that regretted that choice. The other 4 ended up happy. Of the 5 that chose option A, all 5 happened to regret their choice. This information is helpful to you. Rather than learn the wrong lesson from your decision, you learn how to refine your internal policy, so that when similar decisions present themselves in the future, you are better able to deal with them. So, perhaps good decision-making in a prism multiverse isn't all that different to good decision-making in our lone universe. People that use a prism have more information to refine decision-making policies, but they would still be applying those policies to a series of decisions over time. So perhaps the lessons from Ergodicity Economics also apply to cases where you can communicate with parallel universes. Before I finish, I'd like to quickly revisit the portal multiverse. I showed how people offered Peter's Gamble could use the portal to pool their wealth between branches and achieve a growth rate equal to the expected value of the gamble. What I didn't mention is that when authors like Robert Heinlein or Blake Crouch write stories about inter-universe travel, their characters often face challenges when it comes to dealing with money. In these stories, it turns out that money is the one thing you cannot take from one universe and spend in another. I'll leave you to ponder the implications of this for whether expected value would still be a good decision-making criteria in a portal multiverse. Thank you very much.